It's been a little over a week since I caught this stubborn swarm and released the queen into this box. If you haven't seen that original video, I'll put a link above so you can watch that, get caught up on what happened with this little swarm so far, and then come back and watch this follow-up. I still see activity at the box, although I haven't seen a lot of foraging activity coming and going, but they were a small swarm to start with, and I gave them a frame of brood to take care of. So that may occupy a fairly good quantity of the bees. They do have resources in the form of a frame of honey that I put in there, so they are not without food. Between those, it may explain a reduced amount of foraging, or it may be that the main swarm took off again and I'm just left with a few straggler bees here. So let's open up the box and see what's going on. In that last video, I showed that I had added a couple frames to this box that just had starter comb that the bees could build on, but being this late in the year, I would rather the bees store up nectar than use that nectar building comb. So I replaced those frames, and I'll show in just a minute, but I replaced those frames with frames that were full comb. And what I'm looking for today, even though it's been a fairly short time, I'm hoping to find that the bees have stored up some nectar and that there are some eggs in some of the frames, showing that the queen is laying. Worst case, I may find a box with just a few straggler bees, and there aren't many bees initially, but that frame of brood is on the other side, so most of the bees may be on that side. Like I mentioned, this was a small swarm. So the second frame, again, there's really nothing that they've done on that frame of comb. And so far not seeing a lot of bees. Oh, we've gotten to most of the bees here, and I'll show that in just a minute. You can see a few more here. Now I am not seeing any nectar stored up in here, and this particular sheet of comb has fairly large cells. These are drone size cells up through here, so I wouldn't expect to see much laying going on in here. These cells up here are worker sized, but I'm not seeing any eggs in any of these. So although there's a few bees on there, I'm not seeing them doing much with this comb. But on the facing comb, which is the brood comb I moved over, there are some more bees. So looking at this comb, I do see eggs laid up in some of these cells. So it appears that our queen in here is now laying, and that's a great sign. Still not much of a population, but as a very small swarm, they had kind of a weak start. The queen should be right around here. Oh, there, I see her right there. So she's crawling around on there. There, she's right there. So she's in there doing her thing. They have honey on the next frame. I don't have a need to pull that out. We can see, you can see by the drips on the top here, there was some nectar that dripped out of that frame as I was holding it sideways. So they are apparently storing up some wet nectar, or it's possible that was in there already. So it was a quick check, and it looks good in that the queen is laying, which is what I hoped for, and hopefully they have enough of a population to keep them going until they start to build up those winter bees. I will probably need to give them some additional food because the population they have right now, they are not likely to start bringing in much food and may not have a good chance to prepare for winter. So I'll need to give them a little help in that regard, but they are doing their part in starting to build up that population. But wait! There's more. Shortly after I finally caught that first swarm, I found a second swarm in that same apple tree. Now the second swarm was bigger, but they were just as stubborn as the first one. I first saw this swarm on an evening, and so I shook the swarm into a 7-frame box, brought them over here to my little apiary area in the backyard, and I figured they would be good here. But then the next day I went outside and saw what I thought was a third swarm in that same tree, but it turned out to be this swarm again that had just left the box and went back to the tree. So I went through the same frustrating exercise of trying to get them to move into the box, and finally the only way I was able to get them to stay in the box is, like the other swarm, to give them a frame of brood. Now since then they've stayed settled in this box, and the entrance is pretty active, so I'm very optimistic about what we're going to find in this box. So let's open it up and see how they're doing. I'm actually pretty sure I know of the origin of this swarm because I believe they came from a colony that was at this very same location. That colony originated from a cutout that I did earlier this year. They were a pretty good colony. They seemed to be doing all right, and then one day they were just gone. And I couldn't really tell why. The hive had not been overtaken by small hive beetles. There didn't seem to be particular issues in the colony. There wasn't any comb collapse or anything, but the bees were just gone. For a day or two I had no idea where they'd gone. I assumed they had swarmed off, maybe found a tree someplace, and then I noticed that swarm in my apple tree. So I'm guessing that they are the same bees. I can't say for sure, but the one thing that might have contributed to them leaving this location is that I was going to move this box slowly over to my big white hive, Tajma hive over here, and move those bees into that hive. So I had rotated the box and was moving it little by little that way, and possibly just those little changes made the bees feel like it wasn't a good environment for them. So this first frame is just a starter frame. The next one is the same. I should give them some additional comb in here so they don't have to build much comb. But now we're on to a frame of comb with some honey and some brood on there. So it looks about the same on both sides. We've got some honeycomb at the top, got some brood towards the bottom of the comb there. They do have eggs in this comb. The queen is in here and she's laying. She may be on this frame actually. I always try to look when I see eggs because that queen is probably close by. I'm not seeing her, but we know she's around. Oh, that last frame is the frame of brood that I added to keep them in here. This next frame also has eggs. Don't see any new nectar stored up in the top of this one, but I'm seeing eggs in multiple cells here. And this last frame is just a frame of comb that I stuck in here. It was actually a little rough because it had been probably some honeycomb that had been either robbed out at some point or cleaned out after harvest. Probably robbed out, and they haven't done a whole lot with that yet. Got some rough looking comb. I don't recall if it was like that when I put it in there, or if these bees are maybe harvesting some wax off of this comb to use elsewhere. So that all looks good. We know we have a laying queen, so happy about that. We'll just need to come back and give them some more honey resources in order for them to be able to be adequately prepared for winter. Overall, I'm pleased with what I see in these two hives and the progress that they're making. It's been a very short time for them to start storing up any resources, especially right now in mid-August, but I'm really happy to see that both of the queens are laying eggs. So these colonies have a chance of building up their populations in advance of winter. They're both probably going to need some help with some honey resources, so I'll try to give them that, and I would really like to get each of these into an insulated hive rather than in these thin-walled boxes before winter. So they're looking good, but the work's not done yet. I want to say a quick thanks to those who have joined this YouTube channel as members. If you would also like to add your support and get early access to these videos, go ahead and click that join button below. If you enjoyed this video, then you might also like this other video that YouTube has selected, especially for you. Thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you next time.